different options based on trying to find additional ways to get the number lower. Overall, just to kind of recap where we were falling with the reconciled estimate was 11.4. With value engineering, we landed at 9.98. That incorporates the reduction in windows, removing the windows in the gym, reduction in walls and doors, removing the movable partitions, limiting ceramic tile, and limiting how much work we're doing on the site and parking outside of where we absolutely need to for accessibility, as well as removing the landscaping. So that being said, as we all know, based on the original budget, we know there's a hole here that we need to look at. Where can we potentially rework our scope to best suit the funding available, as well as to see where we ultimately need to land. So we looked at three options essentially, as well as three different ways of approaching this, one of which was one we briefly talked about last week, which was to remove the town administrator square footage that's off here and shift it to the north wing. I'll go into more depth on that. Another is looking at various options related to the Center on Aging offices, or Council on Aging rather, offices, and then another looking at the cafeteria and gym scope and what potential reductions can be made there. Okay. The first one we looked at relates to the town administrator's office, and initially looking at it, there was not a way to move that space into the north wing as it was and as the plan was. One of the things that, going through this process with you, we were able to value engineering to pull out the walls and doors we were providing based on doing a plan that was optimized around having more enclosed office spaces. Since we've already gone through the effort, we're talking about reducing the cost and pulling out those walls so that you have a more open office environment. There are ways that we can approach this. If we're accepting we're going to have open offices, we can optimize the plan to an open office layout, which then allows all of these spaces to be that much tighter. The benefit of that is we're able to then fit the town administrator within that space. The negative, as you probably can guess, is that each of the individual departments is smaller, and you potentially have less of an ability in the future to put enclosed offices in should you ever desire to, or to grow. So those are things to keep in mind if we develop this further. However, we are able to do this, and what we've assumed in each of these is still maintaining a meeting room for each individual department, as well as the transaction counter that then separates the public and private space, so to speak. So it's maintaining a lot of the functionality we were looking for, but it doesn't necessarily have that same freedom in terms of the future enclosed office space, as well as for potential future growth. That being said, if we don't have the scope here, that equates to a savings of approximately $300,000. And we're, in doing and calculating this number, we're primarily pulling out the floor, the ceiling, the lighting, and the windows in that area, and assuming that a lot of what walls, doors, and other elements that we had accommodated in that space isn't necessarily cut. Instead, it's going to be shifted over to the north wing. So we're being a little bit conservative in that number and how we reach it. Okay. Any questions at this point?
I don't think so.
Okay. Second options we looked at were related to, or option B, are all related to the Center on Council on Aging. offices. I didn't catch that, Sean. So first is to minimize the office scope. What that means is what we would be doing is the abatement, the demolition, the new finishes, limited walls in the bathrooms. And I'll show you a diagram of that. But essentially, what's the minimum we have to do to give them those 2 classrooms and 2 toilet rooms in that area? Based on that if we only do that much, we have a savings potential of about 45 grand. If we take a step further and we pull out those 2 single-user bathrooms we had located there, those bathrooms account for an additional 80,000. Now, as we've discussed before from my meeting with the building official, we can kind of gear the building use towards the total number of fixtures we have available. I did a quick calculation earlier today to verify if we remove those 2 restrooms, if you have the business use, meaning the north wing, and the assembly use happening at the same time, you can have 190 people in the building maximum. If you only have assembly use, meaning you have a town meeting or something like that going on, you can have a maximum of 400 people in that building, based on your plumbing counts. Then the last number here, the 428, is if you don't do any work whatsoever in those 2 classrooms, which were set aside for the COA offices. So just to kind of backtrack through here, what you see in blue and orange, you would do as part of the first option, which would be to minimize it. You would pull out the orange, which are the 2 restrooms, and only do essentially the abatement and the rework in the windows. If we took the sort of intermediate option, and then the last option is you just lose that entire space there. Okay? And we have a summary at the end, so you don't need to remember any of these numbers. Option C, we did the same exercise essentially related to the gym and the cafeteria. The first is basically to just go through the abatement exercise, go through the lighting exercise, the windows, and only do that related to the gym and the cafeteria. Essentially, that's primarily pulling out your additional storage and the partition between the 2 potential multi-purpose spaces in the cafeteria. That gives you a potential savings of 77 grand. On top of that, if we ever decided that we wanted to pull that space all together, it's approximately 1.7. We went to that degree in part because there's another 44 grand that we can potentially save on the site side if we don't have the occupancy related to that square footage, because it will reduce the amount of paving and the amount of parking that needs to be provided. Okay, so again, just illustrating that, we're pulling out primarily this one. There's not that much change, but it's primarily pulling out the walls and the closets along this side in the multi-purpose room. Okay, so circling back and kind of looking at this in total, and we took this between Sean and I in terms of the order in which we thought this was more likely that you would approach this and more likely want to accept any of this. So the first was, if we lose or relocate rather the town administrator's office, that brings the number down to 9.6. If we reduce the COA offices to minimum, we're still at 9.6, but we're at the low end. If we reduce the gym and the cafeteria to minimum, we're at 9.56. And then if we reduce again by pulling out the bathrooms, we're at 9.48. And then thinking these are less likely that you're going to want to accept, If we pulled the COA offices entirely, you're down at 9. And then if you pull the COA offices, gym and CAF entirely, you're at 7.3.
Well,
Is
some
the,
heavy.
is the 2.6 million reflective of eliminating the COA in its entirety from the building? So if we were
Believe
just to
that.
do, if we were just to do a town hall, or municipal offices, if you will, it would be 7.3 million?
Correct.
Okay,
That's what this number reflects.
okay.
I don't think that relocating the town admin offices, the $300,000, is it worth it? Between 9.9 versus 9.6?
Well, and that's
I
the
mean,
question. Is there savings there? Yes. But what you end up losing, like I said, is space. All of your spaces end up being smaller to accommodate that. And the other piece to that is, like I discussed, it's really kind of coming down to a question of, can you live with people essentially being, granted it's by department, and individual departments are separate from each other, but with the exception of the town administrator, where I've maintained them in an enclosed office because that seemed necessary, everybody else is essentially in an open workstation. And like I said, there's potential to fit one small office in most of these departments in the future, but you're not going to be able to fit much more than one, and they're going to be tiny if you were to choose to do that in the future.
Is it because he didn't remove the larger walls? Is that what the idea is?
I think so.
Okay. But if we go back to what he was saying, and if we kept the town administrator offices the same, so you have to add 300,000 to the 7.3 that we have down
If-
there. So it would come up basically
Yes,
7.6.
so if you were to keep it, would be 3.6 to do just the town hall.
Well, if
7.6.
7.6. So if we kept the town administrative office as is, so put back the 300,000 to the 7.3, it comes up to 7.6.
Yep.
So Mr. Reed, what you're thinking is to present either eliminate COA, gym and cafeteria, but keep the TA's office where it currently is?
Yeah, the reason I was
Versus the 9.9?
yeah, the reason why I was thinking that is because the work that we're doing now with the grant. Trying to get that for the kitchen. So I'm trying to think if that would be able to incorporate all that in there. And that would be another future section. At least all the hazards would have been removed, right? Because they said all the hazards still would be removed.
Yep.
And the windows, and that's something we can approach with that later.
Well, no, because essentially to get the number as low as we're going, we're keeping your windows in place in those areas. If we don't do any work at all
Yeah.
in the COA and the cafeteria and the gym, to get the number as low as we've got it, we're doing nothing there, essentially. And that's kind of the question is, do we start inching back up if we want to take some of that on? Because what we were looking at is how can we maximize what you're able to do and potentially maximize what savings we could potentially try to eke out in this scheme.
matters because one of the things is try to remove the hazards. That's the whole point. If we weren't able to do the whole thing, at least try to get a good foundation for the future to continue on afterwards. At least that was my thought process with this. I don't know if anybody else here was the same thing.
While we're talking, Sean, could you look at if we were to keep, so essentially working from the 7.6, can we throw the window removal back in, removal and replacement? I think we kept the hazardous in regardless, or if we didn't, can we put that back in? So I'll have him work on getting that number as we talk. Because then, to your point, Micheline, I think that makes sense of get you as close to an ideal position as you can be.
Right.
So then it's a matter, essentially at that point, it's almost like a tenant fit up project for someone coming in to do the COA portion.
So to be clear, Tim, you want me to include that abatement number and the demo, or just the abatement and everything to do with the windows? Can you hear me, Tim?
I could not understand a word he just said if he said.
You're not coming through, Lynn.
Oh. I couldn't hear Sean at all. Can't hear me?
Can't hear you.
I don't know, we can hear you, Lynn, can you hear us?
Can hear you, Kevin.
Yeah, we can hear you here, fine.
Right.
Can you hear me better now?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Sean's got some kind of an echo going on every time he comes on.
Can you hear me better now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Tim, can you hear me? Seems like Tim's having an issue. Sorry?
Now just this is the number we'd have though, still not including the payment of the OPM and
What'd you say, Micheline?
I was just trying to make sure whatever number we come up to, that still has to go with the OPM and the architect, that number still has to be added in there. So that's what I was just trying to keep in mind as well.
We can do estimated budgets based on whatever concepts you would like to have presented, so we can have, option one at 7.3 million, it will affect contingency as well. And recalculate based on that budget number for construction. We can do the same thing for other iterations as is needed. It's pretty simple, just changing a couple numbers.
Tim, can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay. Tim, so do you want me to include the abatement number that we pulled out for that percentage of the building, square footage, as well as the demo, all of the demo? Or
Just the windows.
the window selection? Okay, and then,
Essentially, that'll give them then a clean slate to come in and essentially do a tenant fit up sort of approach later for that portion of the building.
okay, but, so if we're taking the windows out, then we have to put something in their place.
Yes, you would include the new windows.
Okay,
So it's the abatement, remove the windows, put new windows in.
with me.
Yeah, sorry about that, my headphones apparently decided to kick the bucket.
Well, Mr. Lee, while Sean's doing that, Gail said there was some good conversation with Gomez.
Yeah. I wasn't expecting to see him on Monday, and because he was at the senior center, and I ran into him, and he was actually very excited of what we're doing here, and he can't wait for our letter so he can help us with the grant. His assistant with him is also a grant writer for him, but she usually does federal, but she says she can work on help us with the state. But she is a grant writer.
Is this an additional grant from the commercial kitchen grant?
Well,
Little fund?
this would have to be additional to that because we know, was Anna, I was only thinking of the kitchen. But if we're applying for the overall grant, the initial one that we have to be, that Chris says we're already in. So that means we are eligible for other grants. And so if they know what we're looking for and where we're at and what stages, she can assist us in that area as well. This is Gomez's assistant.
So I kind of want to keep that in the background here in our minds when we're cutting things, thinking perhaps we might not need to cut them so drastically.
Well, that's why I wanted to go back and look at the hazards, because in my head I'm like, if we can at least do the hazards and if we get other approaches from other grants, but that's what I wanted to look back at.
Yeah, so if we go back, do we have that here? Don, I may need you to point me towards where the previous presentation was, where we had it called out what the kind of minimum scope value was.
The presentation from last week or the very first?
I'm trying to remember which one it would be. I think it might be this one. I think it was the last one where we had a number in it that was essentially what Michelin is saying, which is all of the, essentially if we do the abatement, we do the ventilation, we do the windows, we do the, I just want to pull that number. I think I found it.
If you're,
Yes, so this, the critical scope is what we'd called it.
Yep.
So the hazmat, fire protection, the window, accessibility, ventilation.
alright, so Tim, just confirm for me, so that make sure I give you an accurate number. I'm including demolition for the existing windows.
Yep.
The abatement, repointing of window sills. I can take that out if you want to.
No, I would keep in.
You're blocking at windows. Oh. Hold on one second.
That must have been a different one.
Sealants at the exterior wall. And then the wall panels, because we're not filling that whole wall in with windows.
Correct.
Okay? So just give me one more second. Alright, so for the gym and cafeteria and the corridor,
Mm-hmm.
what I have calculated, so not including the council of aging, cause I will do that next. Including the different things that I read off to you, that gets us to a number of $225,000.
Okay.
That's just for the windows
And the abatement.
and the abatement. So not including the floors and all that stuff.
Yeah, what's needs to be abated would be in the floor, but we wouldn't put a new one in.
Right.
essentially. Yeah.
Exactly. Alright, I will give you a number on the other thing now.
So 225 is abating the floor in the window area?
Yes.
Oh, okay,
We'd be replacing the windows, but we wouldn't replace the floor.
okay.
Right.
Alright, you're thinking the same thing, I was like, did I hear this? That puts us at 7.8 right now.
So far, I have 7846956.
That's what I got. So just for clarification in my head, that's just the cafeteria.
I think so. I think he's doing the other room, the other.
Yeah, he's doing the other one now.
But I just wanna make sure, cause we took out the gym and the cafeteria, and I didn't know if you
Yep,
guys.
that's both together.
Okay, that's.
He's got
both.
them in two separate spreadsheets, that's why he had to do them separate.
No, I just wanna make sure that 225 was the gym and the cafeteria, or
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
actually, that's even better than I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Alright, one more comment. Do you want me to include the sort of entry exit storefront?
I would say yes.
Because that'll be abated.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to update your number for the gym cafeteria area, but the council on aging is getting me at 90,000.
And you can just give me the value on its own, Sean, for the aluminum storefront, if you can find that, if it's isolated, I think it is.
Yes, it is. That's another 10,900.
So 325,000. All of being cleaned up. We just have to do some work.
So we're just shy of 7, or just
I
shy
have
of
8, yeah, I got 7.947 and
Yep.
850, yeah.
That's where we land.
And just clarify what that actually is.
So that would be doing the entirety of the town hall component, where we would be keeping essentially the old plan, where we've already done the value engineering out of it, but it allows then for future infill as you wish. It would also include of the gym, the cafeteria, and the COA space, removal of the windows, and replacement of the windows in that space, as well as the exterior doors in that space.
But it would not be sprinkled, it would not be,
And that number, no. You'd have the capacity in it, because we're still designing your fire protection system for full capacity, but we wouldn't be extending the sprinklers to that space. You wouldn't be providing the ventilation to that space yet either.
okay.
So essentially, you're kind of creating a blank slate.
Yeah.
In that
Removing
side of the world.
hazards.
And if we're just prepping the COA and the gym and the craft, that's going to, affect our numbers, the amount of people assembly.
Yes. Yep, because potentially, if you wanted to hold off on it, you could reduce your overall paving by that additional 40 grand. If you're assuming that you're not gonna take on or move into or ultimately do renovation in that portion at this time. It's not a huge number, but it's additional.
So I think we gotta bring this back to the group and then,
Yeah,
present it to the select board, right?
Yep. I think we gotta decide as a committee what we wanna bring back to the group. I'd probably bring back 3 options.
Yeah.
Get them, and then, present them to the whole committee, and then present it to the select board. And let them decide if they want to ask for 9.9 million, minus the, that 9.9 obviously is a little under, because it doesn't include designer fees. Or the 7.9. I don't think the 7.3 is anything I would present. I think.
No, and that's why we ordered it the way we did, because we talking about it internally, we're like, it just doesn't make sense for many of our conversations. Fully back out.
From a construction standpoint, it's either gonna be 9.9 million or 7.9 million. What do you guys think?
I agree, I think we probably should get together with the group and discuss it, but probably the 2 options, 7.9 or 9.9.
yeah,
Because the ones in between, for the couple hundred thousand, to me doesn't make sense to cut out.
no, cause then all we're doing is kicking a can down the road again.
Right.
Right.
Well, and very likely the issue, I like the way you're approaching it, because very likely the danger, as I'm sure you're aware, is if you do a half measure, that half measure will never be filled
Yeah.
later. It'll just persist.
I think if we were to present this in an envelope and say, you'll never be able to buy a COA for $2 million down the road. Like,
Right.
if you kind of look at it like glass half full as opposed to glass half empty,
Yeah,
you'll never get a council of aging fit out or anything else for $2 million down the road.
Right.
It won't happen, it'll be higher than that if you go further. So, for what it's worth, I understand that it's more money driven than anything else, but
So then what we need for next week's meeting is, Neil to do some sort of budget to add in those soft costs, so we actually have real numbers.
I'm gonna ask Tim to double check his numbers. And then if we have a budget of 7.95 million at the low end and 9.982, I will probably go at 7.95 and 10 million even, and I'll just give you 2 options for the budget based on a construction number at those price points. If everyone's okay with that, that's what I'll do.
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
Kevin, Jim?
Yeah, Jim's not here, so it's just,
Oh,
I think
Then
so.
Shalene?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we'll double check our numbers,
Yeah, I'm
we'll-
very sensitive to
Scramble.
Sean and very appreciative that he went through the exercise that he did, but let's just double check it. and
No,
make sure we
I
haven't
definitely
missed
would want
something
to,
Obvious.
Agreed.
cause that was a very quick number, just so we could illustrate where we were sitting, but
Right.
we'll verify that, we'll get it to you, and we'll essentially put together, just a brief sort of overview of how we arrived at these numbers, just as a summary for the rest of the group, as well as then you can use it for, the select board moving forward.
I mean, this is really helpful to see, you think you're eliminating something, but you're not really eliminating enough for money,
Right,
cost savings.
and unfortunately, it's pretty incremental.
Alright, I think I got enough information.
I do, but I have a question for Tim.
What did you
'Cause
say?
I had a question for Tim, cause it was brought up. Do you know the desk that you said that, we would be receiving would have to pick up?
Yes.
The question is, do you have a time frame when that would be?
Let me circle back on that. I'm actually meeting with the client we're doing that with
Okay,
tomorrow, so I can bring it up and just find out where that all stands cause did we ever get on your side, who am I coordinating with, or who
Yeah,
they're
I sent-
coordinating with? Did
Yeah,
you?
I sent you an email, I'll see if I can find it and resend it, it's just Jeremy.
Oh, okay, I've got Jeremy's contact.
yeah, he was just concerned cause he doesn't have anything enclosed. So he's worried for snow, salt, and everything from the roads.
Oh, you can't put it up in West Street Building? Up
No,
there?
transportation.
Oh,
Yeah, how he's gonna
oh.
get it over there.
And can I just,
I thought Chris said that they had a trailer, is it not covered?
It's an open trailer.
What, Neil?
I just wanted to ask Tim, with the elimination of all the interior petitions and elimination of all the interior offices, are we confident that within the design contingency, we can drop power and data where we need it in the absence of having walls? I'm assuming at some point, someone's desk is gonna wind up in the middle of the room. Not sure who or.
Let Sean and I do, that's a good point, let Sean and I do a quick overview, cause I think we have room, and I think most of the spaces were such that we can get everyone on a perimeter, but to your point, let's do a double check as a safety.
I think it's probably worthwhile. I don't think.
I definitely
don't think
agree,
we're-
because once you
Michael-
said that, I'm like, ew, we didn't really look at that yet, so.
So, Tim, if you go back to the, first page of what you sent, the reconciled estimate of 11 million, are we even presenting that?
I don't know that we have to at this point. I think that's more for our own sake in terms of, unless you wanna show that we've made an effort already. Cause that's kind of the question, this is,
Lynn, I don't think there's any reason not to show it.
Right.
right, because I think if anything, this shows you're approaching in abundant good faith that, hey, this is where we were, we've dropped it already to this, just by making some choices in terms of how we're approaching the renovation.
Alright. So we start at the 11.4, which is really a little higher because of soft costs.
Right,
And then we're gonna end up at our high end at 10 million versus, 7.9.
Yeah.
So as I see it, we're gonna run 3 budget analyses. One with construction at 11 point, Tim, what was the number? 8?
11 point,
480, right?
I already forgot, 11.4.
11.4.
Yeah.
11, call it 11.5.
I'm gonna say 11.5.
Yeah.
And then 10 million.
Yep.
Even?
And even, and then 7.95.
Okay.
And we'll run through our numbers on our end, make sure those numbers aren't gonna shift around too much. Just to
Okay.
make sure we're in the spitting distance.
So then for next week's meeting, which is Tuesday at 4:30, we'll all be around the table. No, zooming in.
Unless we want Sean to join,
Oh, sorry, Sean.
because I don't think he's gonna drive up, but I will be there, and I imagine at that point, if we don't need to run any numbers on the fly, and Sean, you could potentially skip that meeting, unless you wanna come with me.
I don't think that we're gonna have to be doing numbers on the fly, because we're gonna present,
We've got.
Yeah.
So, I think that should work fine.
All right.
And Lynn, that's gonna be a 4:30 meeting, regular full committee?
Yeah, that's what they said last week or the week before, whenever we met last. Is that okay, the 4:30?
That works on my end, I don't know about you, Neil.
I think we tried to set our meeting, maybe we pushed it to 4:30 for somebody. I thought we originally said 4 and then we pushed it to 4:30.
Right.
Well, I know I said that if we did 4:30, I could actually come in person. If we went early, I wouldn't be able to.
Are you
So
okay
we'll
with
say
that?
4:30 at Town Hall.
No, I think it's actually here at the Public Safety Complex.
Public safety.
Okay, even better.
Alright, we'll see
Perfect.
everybody next week.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Lynn, enjoy your vacation.
Hey, thanks. So Neil, you'll send us an email